CramerSez TV. CramerSez TV.
Welcome to the show. My name is Kramer. This is the CramerSez podcast, and we are live. Glad to be here this morning. Our special guest today will be Brian Baker. Brian is an expert in the gold field, known him for a lot of years, and the reason we're bringing Brian on today is not to try and sell you gold. We're not going to tell you where to go to buy it. We'll give you some examples of places that are safer than others, but I want to let you know up front, buyer beware everywhere. What we're going to do today is educate you on the reason why you should have gold, silver, precious metals in your possession based on what's going on. We'd like to welcome you to the show. Brian, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, very welcome. Can't wait to get the information that you've got. Now, you've been doing this for a number of years. You and I knew each other from radio in the old days, and then you went to L.A. to be a big star, ended up working for some big stars, and that's where you get to take the story over. Tell us your story.
Yeah, so I went out there with dreams of being Tom Cruise, and, well, that didn't quite work out for me. But I did get to meet a lot of heroes and work for some interesting people, and I was working for a gal by the name of Lisa Gibbons right around the time that the financial crisis happened. I don't know if anybody even remembers her. She used to be on Entertainment Tonight. Yeah. But I had that gig, and then her numerologist said, hey, it's time to blow out your staff and change your address. All of these things are toxic to you, and so... And sure enough, everybody just came in one day and we were out of a gig. So I'd gone into the film business and was training to be a DIT. And then I got a phone call one day from this company that is they were a very large gold company at the time. Co-host. And I thought, well, I can do something with that. Plus, I was able to get quite a lot of money out of them. So that was a good thing. I just got married. I thought, okay, this is I can make this work. This will be all right. So anyhow, about a year into it, I wound up becoming the host of the program. A gentleman that was hosting, he stepped down. I became the host of the show. I also launched a program with a gentleman by the name of Charles Payne, who's, of course, very big on Fox. And we launched the Payne Nation, but they pulled me out of that deal, and I didn't produce that one. It lasted all of about 2 months. So anyhow, I was working as the host on this program, talking about the economy. It was the time the financial crisis was going on. I knew nothing about gold and silver when I started. I just knew radio, but had an intense interest in the economy and financial markets. And Federal Reserve had started their quantitative easing. There was a lot of concern about inflation. The markets were down. And so it was a really hot time for the gold and silver markets. And gold prices had skyrocketed up to, I think we peaked around maybe $1,750, $1,800 per ounce. So a little bit below where we are now.
Yep, I remember that.
Yeah. And I was fully on board. I mean, I could see what's happening now and what's coming back in 2008, 2009. It was very clear to me where we were going. And at the time back then, the national debt was only about like 16 trillion, 17 trillion maybe. So, that's
back
not
in the good old days.
Yeah. So, and the market, the gold market goes through cycles, and there's always been this narrative that, hey, things are ultimately going to collapse. You want to own gold and silver. And my philosophy on it was, you do want to own gold and silver. You just want to hope that it's the worst performing asset in your portfolio, because if it's going through the roof, times are bad.
Right.
Anyhow, I was working for this company. A guy by the name of Anthony Weiner, former congressman, I think everyone is familiar with him, went after one of the national hosts who was a spokesperson for the company. And at the time, I didn't think much of it because Anthony Weiner was a clown. And I bought into the narrative. But then not too long after that, the Santa Monica district attorney filed charges against this company. And I went, oh, that's not political. There's something going on here. And so and they really were above board. And I was as happy as I could be. They let me kind of take over the online marketing. It was just when YouTube was coming along. So we did a lot of online video content, had a radio show. And then they had a salesperson that got in there that these companies were required to record all of their phone calls. But some of these salespeople would go, "Oh, let me call you back, Mr. Customer." They'd go out, they'd call them back on their cell phone where nobody's getting recorded, and then they would work a deal. And so anyhow, it didn't take too long before that company went down. And
so what you're trying to tell me, Brian, what I'm picking up so far is that a lot of these gold companies aren't on the up and up, and they could be shysters. Is that true?
I would say, yeah, the majority of them that you've probably heard of would fall into that category. And I had planned to kind of take that on. I had a concept because the gold markets, gold and silver dealers, they're not regulated the way stockbrokers are and other traditional investments.
Right. They have no fiduciary responsibility to work in your best interest.
Yeah. And they also aren't, gold is considered a collectible. It's not considered an investment by the government. Right. So, they get away with some things, and you have a lot of people in there that they have no conscience at all, and they're just looking to make a ton of money. So, just to kind of condense the story, I was going to launch my own company because I'd figured out a way to kind of cut the legs off of these big companies and elevate the honest companies that are sort of the mom and pop shops to the national level. I had a business partner. It wasn't working out. And I got a job offer from a company that is now the largest gold IRA company in the country. And they have a ton of big name spokespeople that most people are familiar with. And I was sitting in their office, and I'm hearing the salespeople on the fit really well together.
Yep.
And this one salesman said, "Okay, well, God bless you, sir." And I thought, it just made me sick. So I texted my wife and I said, "Honey, I know this is going to wreck us." When the company that I was working for prior went down, they left us with a ton of unpaid media buys. Financially, we were just wrecked. My daughter had just been born. It was a mess. But I just texted my wife. I said, I can't do this, honey. And she said, if it doesn't feel right, you have my permission to walk away. And so we did, and most of the days I still feel good about that decision.
Well, Brian, you and I have talked about it over the phone over the last few years, in particular since COVID, that, when I took on the Republican Party in the state of Indiana and said that what they were doing, the lockdowns that they were doing were not only illegal, but unconstitutional, and the Republican Party cut me loose, there's that thing where you say, hey, yeah, I just lost a lot of money, but I'm going to be better off in the end. Did you feel the same way? Was that how your walk away was?
Yeah, I mean, I just thought I'm going to sleep better at night.
Right.
And I couldn't, even though these were people that I'd never met before in my life, and it was a significant amount of money. I mean, I'd probably be retired by now, but I just thought I just can't do it. And at that point I was so deep into fighting that I didn't want to sell out, now we paid a huge financial price for that and still haven't recovered. Because we were doing very well. And I mean, we had the dream life, but hey, things have worked out the way they have. And, I'd rather be raising my kid where we are now versus LA anyhow. So,
well, that's the whole thing, right? Is that at the end of the day, you have to look at, this is what I've said about being on social media, is that a lot of the guys and gals that are on social media, influencers, are, for lack of a better term, they're grifters. Right.
Mm-hmm.
They're always selling something. Now, the product that they're selling you is that they're a patriot and they're this and they're that. And then you find out in the end, as soon as they learn that they're going to lose sales, or they're not going to be able to have access to a platform because of what they say, they shut down that part of their speech and they quit talking about those things so they can keep making the money. And I'm not like that. My character is worth more. My reputation is worth more than a t-shirt sale or a cup sale or a hat sale. So what I started doing with my social media, and that's why I had you on today, is that we don't bring people on to this program that are selling something. Everything that we're talking about is educational in how to prepare for what comes down the road next, what we're seeing next, and warning people of the signs to look out for of how not to get grifted or how not get taken advantage of. So let's talk about number one. Explain to me very quickly, what is the importance of precious metals in hard times? What security does that give you?
Generally, gold and silver and precious metals tend to do really well in times of economic uncertainty, when people are worried about the future of the economy. They're worried about whether the government is going to be able to pay its bills. When there is chaos going on in the world, like right now, we've got 2 wars going on, potentially 3, and
Right.
So it's a good hedge or insurance if you have money in stocks and other investments. Generally, when the stocks are down and those other investments are down, gold tends to perform very well. The disadvantage to it is that, unlike a stock, it's not going to pay you a dividend every single year. Unlike a government bond, you're not getting interest on it. So I tell people, buy gold and hope that it's the worst performing asset in your portfolio. But
Well, I see another example is we call collecting brass. For
Yeah.
my preppers, they know what that means. If you're collecting brass, right, it's just like gold. It sits there in that can. It doesn't gain any value until, well, times get hard.
Yeah.
And then you've got the most valuable thing that you can have. Brass and gold, by the way, brass, lead, and gold, are some of the most valuable things that you can have in hard times. So you've got this commodity. It's not growing in value. It's just sitting there waiting for hard times to come, and you hope that you never have to use it. With that being the case, the number one question I get from my followers is, okay, I'm going to go buy gold. I'm going to go buy silver. What would you recommend? Would you recommend that people get into silver first? Because we're not talking about an investment here. We're talking about planning for the future of hard times. So in an event where the economy turns, is it better to have silver at lower denominations and a lot of it, or have a big block of gold that you've got to figure out how to monetize or how to turn into whatever you need it to be? Which do you, in your mind, do you see is best?
Well, look, I mean, the silver market, silver tends to be a little bit more volatile. And so in terms of getting your value out of it, that can be a little bit more challenging. But if you're someone that doesn't have a whole lot of money to start, it's a good place to just get yourself into the markets and own precious metals. That said, I would prefer that people buy gold. I think it's just a better long-term bet. There's a finite amount of it. And truthfully, you can buy gold bars. The challenge with that is if things implode and you get into a bartering system, it's pretty hard to barter a giant bar of gold. You're probably better off buying coins. But this is where people tend to get ripped off. Is I tell people, when you're going to buy coins, buy bullion coins, because typically the markup that you're going to pay on that is maybe 3 to 5%. What happens
and explain
is
that real quick. When you're saying markup, you're saying that the wholesale price for the gold dealer is $100. They're going to charge you $103 for that piece of gold, correct?
right. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's essentially almost no money in it for the gold dealers. So if you're going to be on a national news network and be running ads all day long and have national spokespeople, that money's got to come from somewhere. So what a lot of the companies will do to make gold more accessible for people is offer what they call a gold IRA rollover. And that's where a lot of people really wind up getting screwed in the long run, because they'll wind up paying fees to actually do the rollover. They'll pay storage fees. And then on top of that, they're paying a premium for the gold. And it's a little bit easier to hide what the premium price is that you're paying if you're putting it into something like a gold IRA.
And you don't have physical access, right?
Right.
Somebody else is holding your gold with a promise to give it to you at some point in the future.
Yes.
Okay.
The other challenge is that, and this is where it gets really, really tricky, is that what you're hearing about the future of the economy and the risks that we're facing, all of that is true. What happens, however, is that a lot of the gold companies will use that narrative and say, okay, let's take a look at what's happening now, and let's take a look at what happened in the 1930s when the government, Roosevelt said, hey, here's an executive order, no hoarding gold, and people had to hand in their gold. And then once they had that, then they revalued it. Everyone got a haircut, and it was a means of creating inflation. Right. So there were coins that were exempt at that time from the confiscation order. Pre-19 quite a bit of gold and silver. It's just you weren't able to own above a certain level because they were trying to prevent hoarding.
Right.
But what happens is where your markup on bullion might be around 3 to 5%, when you start getting into numismatic coins, now all of a sudden you're paying a premium, depending on the gold dealer, of 30, 40, sometimes 50%.
Right.
And it's very easy to hide that. And what they will tell you is, hey, over the long run, these coins do very well and they increased in value based on this time period faster than just plain bullion coins did. But the problem is usually numismatic coins, those do well in good economic times because they're considered collectibles. And so people buy them like you collect art or you collect classic cars. When things turn to crap, people are selling all of that. And so their value tends to plunge. And now we're just talking about what's the gold content. So I'm just not a big believer in that. If you want to collect coins and you love that as a hobby, fine. But if you just want to own gold and silver, keep it really simple, because most people, if things do turn to crap, most people don't know anything about the value of those coins anyway. Buy American Eagles, buy Canadian Maple Leafs. It's high gold content. It's pure. It's simple. You can buy them. Like American Eagles, I can get a quarter ounce, a half ounce, or a 1 ounce coin. Canadian Maple Leafs, same deal, except you can also get 1/10 ounce. Very accessible, easy to find. The markups are low, and you're not going to get ripped off.
Okay, so when you say, so folks, what I want you to understand is that what he's telling you is that when you go out to find this bullion or these coins, is that the markups are going to be very low on those versus a numismatic, which is a collectible, and the IRA, which you don't have physical access of. I believe firmly in physical access. I don't like a promissory note for my money. Right. No. That's why I hate putting money in the bank. I have to, but I'd rather have it physically on me. So with that being the case, you're saying that the best way to buy, regardless of what you do, is to buy the bullion, regardless.
That's my belief. All right. Okay. Yes. If you're going to get the most bang for your buck, then that's what you should do.
Okay. So the bullion you can go get, right, at so you're talking about the Maple Leaf, you're talking about the American Liberty. Those are coins can you get those from banks? Is that how readily available they are? Can you order them and have them brought into a bank, or what's that process?
It's tough to find, especially in times like this, because gold dealers are trying to get that, and they will use that as their loss leader quite a bit. With that said, I will tell you, and I don't have any kind of affiliate deals at all. I don't have associations with these companies, but there are a couple of sources that I'm comfortable telling people about. One is a company called Heartland Precious Metals. A guy by the name of Paul Montgomery owns that company, and he's a good guy. Paul actually is one of those who's a huge advocate for consumers, and so he has gone and testified to fight against some of these larger, more predatory gold companies, and has got people got their money back for them, and has been involved in a number of lawsuits fighting on the behalf of the consumers. Now, he does sell collectible coins, but he doesn't sell them as, hey, you should own this because the government care of there. He's an honest guy and a straight shooter. There's also a company out there called AppMex. They're very accessible. They're online, and you can go. They have a ton of different products on there, so it's easy to get lost. But again, if you just stick to the basics, stick to bullion, and I would not buy limited edition coins. That's what a lot of gold dealers do now, and you pay a huge premium on that. Just keep it simple. Buy American Eagles, buy Canadian Maple Leafs. You're going to pay a little bit higher premium on a smaller coin. If you get a quarter ounce American Eagle, you're going to pay a little bit higher premium on that than a 1 ounce coin. So it just sort of depends on what are you looking to do, and what is the reason that you're holding it? Do you believe that things are going to implode and that we're going to get into a bartering system? Well, you probably want to have coins there's easy divisibility, right? If you're just looking for something to preserve your wealth because you think we're going to hit massive inflation, and I will tell you, China is buying a lot of gold right now. India is still buying a lot of gold, and there's only so much of it out there.
There's a reason that they're doing that. The reason that China and India and Brazil and South Africa and Russia are buying a lot of gold is because they've started a new system called BRICS. And BRICS is going to be the first system in our lifetime, when I say system, a money exchange system. It's how the international banks exchange money. Currently, we go through SWIFT. But SWIFT, America controls. And we've been messing with the economy and with the currencies for about 70 years. And so these other players the BRICS nations have decided to form a brand new group of ways to exchange international funds, and they're backed by gold, oil, commodities.
Yes.
Precious metals, gas, oil, and rare earth minerals. That's what's going to back their system. Our system is based on debt, which gets us to the next question. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So we've been doing this economy, the way that we've been doing it since 1971, has been based on debt. We came off of the gold market back in 71 with Nixon. Since then, we've racked up, let's say $40 trillion in debt, because they're still spending. Even though it's only 33 right now, the monies that they have in the pipeline that they want to spend puts us up at about $40 trillion in debt. The economy is in free fall. The stock market, I'm waiting to see what it does today, but yesterday it tanked. Let's see if it does it again. We've got 2 wars that we know of for sure going on, a potential third. We bombed Syria yesterday or late last night. So the reason that people get gold is for uncertain times. Okay? And when I say gold, I mean gold, precious metals. Let's talk just precious metals. We say gold, but we mean precious metals. So the exchange rate when times go hard is going to change. Now, if you're going to do this, correct me if I'm wrong, but in hard times, your value of gold goes up. Correct?
Well,
typically?
Listen, there's no guarantee or rule of thumb. I mean, you have generalities. So in general, yes, that is true. That doesn't mean that that's always going to be the case. What I think is probably
let me step back. Let me step back. So that's considering I think what you're saying is considering that everything stays the same, that's probably not going to be the case, or could be the case, might not be the case. You can't promise it, yada yada. I get all that. The electricity goes down.
Yeah.
We're no longer, or we lose the ability to exchange cash for whatever reason. The internet goes down, electricity goes down, whatever. We now have to exchange barter. Goods that we have, the cash that you have in your hands will only go so far. You won't be able to get in your bank to get it. So what do you have available in exchange for goods, whether that be food, water, the basics? We're talking worst case scenario. In that situation, your gold and silver comes into play how? What does it do that?
The theory for folks that buy in and see that happening is that you would be able to exchange that for, if you need somebody to fix your vehicle, or you need to get access to food, farmers would potentially take precious metals. I've always you probably better own some bullets as well, because things are going to get pretty nasty. My strategy with gold and silver is, if the economy were to implode, and if the dollar were ultimately just wiped out and destroyed, and they introduced a new currency, like what happened in Germany, right? They will probably revalue gold based in that currency. And who knows what will happen with debt. But, from my perspective is, if you own it, and you're sitting on debt, you've got a $400,000 mortgage. What I would be doing is not only prepping, making sure that I've got food and I've got bullets and protection for my family, and yes, I've got gold and silver, but I'd also be keeping an eye on what's happening with inflation. And as gold prices started to skyrocket, and I go, oh, you know what, I can now sell this and pay off my mortgage, and I'm set on that front. That's something that I would do. I would take advantage of that. But I think really the more likely scenario is there's going to come a point in time where the dollar is no longer going to be the world reserve currency, and it is no longer backed by gold.
And that's going to happen sooner than later. Do you believe that?
Yes. Right. And, here's the thing that anyone that was in this world back in 2008 understood what was happening when the pandemic hit, and they made the announcement that everyone was going to get stimulus checks. And I remember it so clearly. My parents were down there, and I knew exactly what that was, because Ben Bernanke, former chairman of the Federal Reserve, he used to call him Helicopter Ben, and he's considered an expert on the Great Depression. And his theory was, we will never have another Great Depression, because in the event that we suffered massive deflation, you could simply print money and throw it out of helicopters. So that would be their means of countering it.
Right.
When they made the announcement that they were sending out these stimulus checks, and this was unprecedented. I mean, this was not a tax credit. This was printing money and injecting it into the economy, and doing it recklessly, because there wasn't time to go through checks and balances. It was just flood the economy with money or we're going down, and we're going down fast. And I remember looking at my parents and I mean, I was terrified because I knew what it meant. And I did some interviews on some radio stations and I tried to explain it to people. And I said, here's the reality of this. Because there were a lot of folks, well, I don't want my stimulus check. And it was a matter of pick your pain. We're either going to have a terrible depression and you're going to get destroyed, or we're going to do this now and then we're going to have massive inflation coming. And I don't think most people really understood that because let's be honest, there aren't a lot of people that are interested in talking about this or interested in worrying about worst case scenarios. Who wants to think about that when you can watch a TikTok video or a cat video or, your favorite TV show? Nobody wants, people's lives are hard enough. They don't want to think about what's coming down the road. And that's a problem, right? And consumer is now holding over $1 trillion of debt on their credit cards, and they are using credit cards to purchase basic goods and services.
Yep.
Yes. And inflation, as much as they have hiked interest rates, and here's another thing that people should understand. I never believed that the Federal Reserve would hike rates to the level that they are now, because when you hike interest rates, now all of a sudden the cost of servicing your government debt goes up significantly. So we are paying a massive amount of money every single year. It is unsustainable. Our economy, as robust as they want to tell you it is right now, we are not capable of sustaining this. We have too many unfunded liabilities. We have too much going on. We are sending money overseas. We've got wars going on, and inflation is continuing to rise. So this is going to hit people really bad. And I don't know that we are ever going back to a time
Yep.
What the cost of a home is now. Look at and with interest rates and home prices still aren't coming down. The cost of food, most people are having to work 2 to 3 jobs in order to make ends meet. So hard times are coming. This is nothing compared to what we have coming down the road. So, it's going to be nasty, and I don't know how it ultimately all shakes out, but I think the American dream, as it existed in the past, is done.
I disagree to an extent. The dream is still there. There's people in the path of that dream, right? That has to be rectified before we can move on. I've been saying it for a long time. The people that are in charge are either inept at their job or they're corrupt. And I don't care which it is anymore. It needs to be solved. So let's talk about the economy. What we see here currently is that things are more expensive. The default rates are going through the roof. So what people understand is that the repossession of cars is one of the first signs that the economy is tanking. Last month, the repossession of cars, I think it was a 300% increase month over month. 1 month. Home capture by banks, meaning that they forfeited the homes, right? They couldn't pay for them. They're up substantially. Now, the market isn't moving that much right now because of the interest rates, but more and more homes are becoming available. I have a building right now that if we don't get things taken care of by August of next year, it's going back to the bank because the economy can't support it. I'm not spending my cash on a building that I can't move. I'm done.
Right.
So I know where I am in the mix. I know where other things are in the mix. So the question for you is with all of these things piling up, getting worse and worse and worse, does the economy get better if we continue down this path of what we're doing? Or does
no. And here's what people need to understand as well. You have folks with PhDs that serve in these high-level government positions and folks that serve at the Federal Reserve. And there is this assumption guess based on what their beliefs are and what monetary theory they subscribe to. So it really is to an extent just playing with things. And these are unprecedented times. Quantitative easing, that was something new that we introduced. And now just injecting money directly into the economy, that was really what they call the monetary policy of last resort. So,
and the only reason that they've done this is not to support the economy, but to support politicians. It has nothing to do with the economy. It has to making sure that they can punish certain people and they can benefit certain people. It's like Facebook being able to turn up something, dial here, and all of a sudden you got people talking about this shit. And if you turn up this dial, they start talking about this stuff. They can drive the economy in the same way that Facebook can drive a narrative, or MSNBC or CNN or Fox News can drive a narrative.
Truthfully, they don't have that much control over it. And I think that what is behind a lot of it is they're trying to keep us out of trouble for as long as they can, and hoping that they're going to be able to find one more way to keep kicking the can down the road. But eventually, I mean, the music stops.
Right. So let me ask you this. What does it look like when that happens? When the music stops and everybody starts scrambling for their chairs, are we going to see, in your opinion, are we going to see a return of the 1933 or the 1930 Depression? Are we going to see that by 1933, 1934, the majority of the nation, 25, 30, 40% is unemployed, or will it be worse?
Man, there are people far smarter than me that have opinions on this, but what I think is probably more likely is that we're going to get hit with massive inflation that the government can't get a handle on. And when that happens and people aren't able to afford food, and you're going to have that scenario where people are delivering wheelbarrows full of cash to go and get a price or get a loaf of bread. And here's what folks need to understand about hyperinflation as well, because that's a real doomsday scenario that is a possibility. When you have hyperinflation, it doesn't just go from 5% inflation to 50% inflation overnight. It starts like it is now. It starts and you see it increase over a period of a decade, and then it starts to accelerate, and then it gets really bad towards the end. So to kind of bring it back to gold prices right now are at a record high. So then the question becomes, should I buy it? Is it worth making that investment? Because I will tell you, there are a lot of people that bought at the peak of the last bull market that still haven't made their money back, especially if they bought from one of the companies that advertises on a
Fox News.
Okay, there you go. Let's just get it out in the open. If a company is advertising on Fox, I probably would, a gold company, I would not do business with them. But there are folks that haven't made their money back yet. So the time to buy gold and silver really was when gold was back down at $800,000, $900,000 an ounce. But if you really believe that things are going to implode and that we're headed for hard times, then yeah, I would say own a little bit of gold, a little bit of silver. I wouldn't put everything you have into it because, like anything, is offering a 1 ounce bullion bar. I think,
really?
Yeah. They keep selling out of them, but yeah, they were offering that, and there was a limit on how many you could get. They sold out really quickly. I mean, truthfully, you think of Costco's like this bargain basement place, but honestly, I would trust them. I would think
right more than the guy hawking gold on Fox is what you're saying.
Yeah, and let me tell you this too.
And I thought you were talking about.
Yeah, I thought does
his name rhyme with Glenn Beck?
You got it. Yeah, and Glenn's one of those. He was deep enough into the company. I think he understood what was going on. I don't know. I can't judge the man's heart. Some of these other hosts, I don't really think that they understand. Just like a lot of the folks that are on social media that are promoting some of these gold companies and kind of parroting the narrative. It's complex how the pricing system works and how the sales process works. And it's very closely guarded, and I'm sure I'll be getting a phone call with, somebody threatening my family tonight. I mean, they're very aggressive about going after people because there's a lot of money involved in that industry. But I think a lot of these.
Well, that could be the case. Brian, one of the things that I see down the road. And again, I'm not a doomsday guy. I'm optimistic. I hope for the best, but I'm planning for the worst. And the reason I'm planning for the worst at a record pace right now is because of what we've seen happen over the last 7 years, not only with our politics, but our economy and the brink of war that we're on internationally. We just bombed Syria last night, right? We're bombing other countries without authorization from Congress. We don't have a statement of war yet, but we're on the brink of it. It's my belief, and this is my opinion, that it doesn't get better before it gets a lot worse. And if that's the case, and I hope I'm wrong, I keep saying the same thing, I hope I'm wrong, but just in case I'm not, what would you say would be a good, and not as an investment for making money down the road, but how much do you believe that somebody should have on them in gold or silver in coins that are tradable? And what I mean is the base just be able to, this is worth this amount of money. How much, like a minimum for rounds, they say a minimum for bullets is you should have at least 3,000 to 4,000 rounds in your home ready to go at any time.
Yeah.
That's what I've got. With that being the case, what should I have in gold? What's your opinion on how much someone should really think about gold and silver? How much should they have on them? Is there an amount that you think is a minimum that you should have on you for a rainy day?
Listen, I think 3 to 5% of what your overall investable assets are is generally safe. Maybe 10%. When you start going above that, and again, there are people who are very informed on this that would have a completely different opinion on it. I am not a financial advisor. I'm just a thinker, and I've been around these markets and have paid attention for a long time. But I would don't go into debt to buy gold and silver.
Right.
That's a bad idea.
Right.
Because you're essentially gambling at that point in time. But if you have the money available, and let's face it, if you're sitting in a traditional savings account right now, and if you're one of the folks that's blessed enough to have a reserve fund, it probably makes sense to take a small percentage of that and buy some gold and silver. But the reality is that the majority of people out there do not have the money to purchase gold and silver. That's why IRAs are so big, because that's sort of like an automatic. That's an easy way to get your hands on it. But the problem is, more than half of Americans have nothing saved for retirement. The majority of people are one paycheck. They might have it.
Brian, that's what we've seen over the last few weeks. The reports that we're looking at, and you talked about it earlier, is the credit card debt. Is that what I've been saying for the last few months is that we'll see the signs that the economy is beginning to tank when we see folks getting rid of their luxury items. Right. So when they get rid of their Harley, they love that Harley, but they need the money. And so they put it out on the street, and they put it out there for full value. Nobody buys it at full value because, well, they don't have the money either.
Right.
So there's a deflation in the value of the luxury items you have because people don't have the money to buy those luxury items, so they no longer have that high value. That's what we're seeing. So boats, motorcycles. A buddy of mine is selling his plane. He's got a single-engine plane that he's selling because he can't afford to keep it at the airport anymore. Right. Yeah. He owns a plane. I want to reiterate: owning a plane is like owning a horse. Right.
Right.
Unless you're using it to make money, it is a huge expense. And all it does is it eats fuel and shits out exhaust. That's it. It's the same way with a horse, right? So as we see these items start to pop up, the signs are there that the economy is on the brink. The gold issue, and again, I go back to it, not as a doomsday scenario, but as I'm not looking at it as an investment. I'm looking at it as a means of exchange in the worst case scenario. Not only that, but booze. Booze is another one. It's huge during hard times, right? If you can make alcohol, if you've got alcohol, if you've got bourbon, if you've got gin, if you've got vodka, if you've got rum, if you've got those four basics, you've got the ability to trade and barter and sell. In fact,
Yeah.
the bartender, the guy that owned the bar, the liquor store, or whatever, back in the day, was generally one of the richest guys in town because people would come in and go, "I need a drink, but I don't have anything." He's okay. I'll take a pig. I'll take a chicken. So I see
Yeah.
us going back to those days. There was a big push on social media a few weeks ago for bartering and setting up a bartering system. So
Mhm.
having those base metals to be able to utilize down the road. Do you think that now, I mean, I know that what we talked about with Glenn Beck and these other guys that have been screaming doom for a long time, they were right, but they monetized it for a number of years.
Yeah.
Now we're getting to the point where what they've been preaching is starting to really, really happen. And they're still trying to monetize on it with a group of people who no longer have the assets to buy those things. So, based on what you're seeing with both the gold market, the stock market, and the economy in whole, your 30,000-foot view, based on what you know and historical data, does it get better anytime soon, or do we have to feel more pain before we bottom out?
Oh no, it's going to get worse. There's no way. And again, folks have their blinders on or they have their heads in the sand, but you can't ignore just the reality of our economic situation right now and all of the data and all of the things that you're seeing happening now on a daily basis with people selling off items and paring down and having trouble making ends meet and putting things on their credit card. It's going to continue to accelerate. And keep in mind that in the midst of all of this, you also have new technology that's making it more accessible for employers to cut costs and cut employees and reducing jobs even further. So, you talk about the guy that is the bartender. Now, I mean, and again, you would think that because these folks have been in government for a long time, that they get it, that they understand all of this stuff. They don't.
Nope.
I have talked to congressmen, and they are some of the dumbest people on the planet. We are not sending our best and brightest to DC.
Well, I don't know if you saw the piece with John Fetterman. He was on with Colbert, and I don't know how Colbert kept his mouth shut because Fetterman comes on and says, "Hey, we're not sending our best and brightest to DC." This is the guy who had a stroke and can't communicate with people directly without a device in his hands. So, or Hank Johnson. I don't know if you know who Hank Johnson is. He's a congressman from Georgia. And in a hearing, he actually brought forth, he asked a naval official if he thought that putting one more, I shouldn't say naval, as a military official, if we put one more base on the island of Guam, is the potential that it's going to flip over?
Yeah.
Is it too heavy? It'll flip the island over. That's our congressional leaders. Brian, you said that it's going to get worse. So let's put our thinking hats on. And in that case that it gets worse, what is your worst case scenario? What do you see as the worst case scenario for the economy?
Retirees not having money to live on, and Social Security not being enough to support them to even be able to buy basic goods and services. People not working, not able to feed their families. And as a result, I mean, most of us, if you got kids, you're going to do anything for your kids, even if that means resorting to violence and taking from somebody else. So, and we have seen hints of that, right? Look at what has happened in California when people are desperate and they're just, you're not thinking straight when you're hungry. Yeah. Somebody once told me, and I thought it was so smart. They said, if you've got a war zone, the thing you want to be dropping is not necessarily even bombs, but peanut butter sandwiches, because when people are hungry and they don't have access to food, that's when things get really crazy and really dangerous. So, I mean, look at what happened with the Summer of Love a couple of years ago and the riots. People are angry, they're primed, they're stressed out, they're worried. Mental health issues are through the roof. So, I mean, we're primed right now for things to get very explosive. And we have now access to platforms that allow people to engage in even more divisive rhetoric. And, it's very frightening. We don't have the kind of leadership that we did in the past that's out there and is able to be a voice of confidence and a voice of calm, and people aren't listening anyway.
Right.
They have tuned all of that out.
Right.
So, I think that we're going to see a lot of people losing their homes. I think we're going to see crime go up. And it's going to be very, very challenging. That's worst case scenario. I hope that it doesn't go that way. But the truth is, it's been a slow trickle in that direction for a lot of years. And when we were talking about all of this stuff, 15 years ago,
right,
everybody was worried about it, and it was like, okay, we bought ourselves some time, and everyone just kind of forgot about it because, hey, times were good. And the truth is, and the reason that gold prices, one of the reasons they continue to surge right now, is folks don't buy in advance thinking, hey,
right,
worst case scenario. They don't buy for that.
Right.
They wait until the very last minute, and then they panic. And that's when you aren't able to get stuff, right? And you have shortages, and prices continue to skyrocket. So, we're not real good in this country about planning ahead, planning for that worst case scenario, and hope that it doesn't happen. Sure. You don't want them banging on your door.
Yeah, I don't know any of my neighbors in this new community. We're in a condo right now, and I hate this condo, by the way. But I don't know any of my neighbors.
Yeah.
And I don't talk to any of them. And even if I did, I wouldn't tell them how much food or how much weapons or what I've got inside my home or where I've got weapons stashed across the state, because it isn't just here. It's not just my home, right? And I think it's going to get that bad. I'm not a doomsdayer. I'm not one of those guys that preaches that. But I'm looking at what's happening. What happened in Israel could just as easily happen here with a group of terrorists in this country. And they go, oh, Kramer, that's not possible. They don't need to cover the entire country. They just need to cause terror. That's all they need to do. And the moment that happens, we're in trouble. That's what we're accounting for. I hope to God it never happens. I hope I'm wrong. I hope someday everybody looks back and go, Kramer was a moron. He didn't know what he was talking about. He was a big mouth. I hope to God that's the case. I don't think it's going to be.
Well, and I will tell you this too. As much as the FBI has lost their credibility, so the likelihood of that happening is very, very high.
Right.
And what they attack and how they go after us, I don't know. But and I'm also one of those. When the pandemic hit, listen, you can take the government narrative on that, or you can take what the most likely scenario. I think we all kind of know what happened there on that. So
Occam's razor tells us everything, right? Lowest common denominator thinking. It's never the most complex thing ever. It's always the most simple thing. And that's what I try to tell people, right? It's never as complex as you think it is. It's always simple. Just like the attack on Israel. Extremely simple. No different than the attack on 9/11 in America. Extremely simple.
Yeah.
Right? Complex in getting all the money and the people together, but the act itself, extremely simple and barbaric. Brian, thank you so much for joining us today. Where can people catch up with you if they want to learn more about what you have to say or what you're thinking?
I have a Twitter account that's kind of been dormant here for a little while because I was doing stuff in the media and then I stepped back for a while. But you can find me at Naptown Bry. Again, I would encourage you. If you're going to buy gold and silver, I definitely do your research. But the companies I mentioned, I think are a safe bet. And again, I don't have any association with them at all. But thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. And hopefully there are some people out there that will listen, because the majority won't. We know that.
Right.
But if you can reach a couple of people, then hey, I guess it's worth it, right?
Well, thanks so much for joining us today. I appreciate you. We'll be back in just a moment. Again, CramerSez.com is open. If you want to go join a free speech platform, that's it. We have never, ever booted anybody off. We don't censor. If you're looking for free speech and you want to get amongst those like you, other patriots, you can build a group. You can build a community, 100% free, CramerSez.com. Go do it right now. It's like a Facebook experience. The other thing that we want to talk about before closing, the only thing that I've ever asked you to ever buy are T-shirts and hats and mugs or whatever else we got available at CramerSez.shop. 100% of the proceeds go to help the detainees of J6. Please go help them. CramerSez.shop. With that being said, I'm out of here. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow or as soon as we can.
This is Kramer Says TV. Kramer Says TV.